Hey, welcome back to the MindShare podcast. This is where we share strategies and insights to help you work smarter, build stronger relationships, and create the success that you deserve. This show is proudly sponsored by Kits Keep in Touch Systems, your ultimate marketing and lead generation CRM. Real Estate Magazine, Canada's trusted source for real estate news and insights. And REVEL Realty, redefining real estate with bold marketing, cutting edge training, and a culture that empowers success. Learn more about our sponsors and download your free copy of the Ultimate Marketing Bundle at mindshare101.com. And of course, while you're there, discover how our full range of services can help take your business to the next level. From one-to-one coaching for personalized growth to the MindShare Collective group coaching community for community-driven success, momentum training to build unstoppable progress, and keynote speaking to inspire and motivate your team. We are here to help you elevate your game. And while you're at it, learn more about joining the revolution to experience the bold new way that real estate is being redefined. Today's episode is number 324, and we are diving into exploring strategic branding strategies to help you communicate to dominate. He's an executive director with RE/MAX Canada. With a background in journalism, he joined RE/MAX in 2014 to lead communications and social media efforts throughout Western Canada. Then in 2019, he transitioned to the Regional Development Department to help Western Canadian broker owners fully leverage the value of the RE/MAX brand. He is also the host of 3 podcasts, and he says, impactful communication is my passion. Joining me on this episode of the MindShare podcast is special guest, RE/MAX Canada Director, Mr. Wade Paterson. Wade, welcome to the MindShare podcast.
David, thanks so much for having me on. And episode 324, I just want to share a stat with the audience that 90% of podcasts don't get past episode 3. And you're on 324. I know I'm flipping the script here, but I just want to ask you, like, when you set out with MindShare podcast in day 1, did you ever anticipate you'd be doing 300 plus of these?
Oh my God! You know what? First, thank you for bringing that up. It blows me away sometimes to think how many of these we've done, because I can tell you, I can go right back to exactly where I was sitting when a buddy of mine called me up and said, "Hey, we're doing something big. You need to be part of it." I said, "Okay, great. What's up?" He's like, "But I need you to get 3 podcast episodes recorded in the next 7 days." And I said, "Dude, I don't even have a podcast." He's like, "I know." And so, no idea, man. I got the 3 done.
Wow.
But here we are 321 episodes later at 324.
Amazing.
And I'm still blown away, man. But yeah, it's very cool. Thank you for the recognition. And again, thanks for making the time to be here today, man. I know you got 3 podcasts. I'm like, this guy's killing it over here. We gotta sit down and have a conversation about this stuff.
I'm excited, and we were chatting before we hit the record button here that usually it's me on the other side. I'm asking the questions. And so this is a lot of fun for me to sit down with you, and yeah, it's going to be a great conversation.
Well, buddy, I am certainly interested or excited to have it. And I thought what I would do is I'd set the stage a little bit today for those that may not be familiar with you. I know that look, I say East Coast has like really a lot of the best people out here in Canada. West Coast though is the best coast, like to me. And listen, for everybody understanding right now, I'm sitting here in what some may think we believe is the center of the universe, but we don't. I just want to put that out there. But I'm in Toronto, and I do love being out in the mountains and being out in the West Coast. I know you're out there, but for folks that don't know, I know that you transitioned from journalism to lead these communication efforts at RE/MAX Western Canada. And by the way, I got to tell you, I don't think I shared this. I think communications like the epitome of anything. Like, you want to build a culture, you want to have people in the know, you want to gather people together. If you don't communicate, nobody knows exactly what's going on.
100%.
But you're doing all this stuff with Western Canada, and now you're an executive director. I thought we might sort of go into like what sparked your interest in the real estate game, and how did that background from journalism really influence what you're doing today? Because you said you hadn't sold real estate, you hadn't really been in that realm. It's interesting.
Yeah. So I went to college in Calgary and studying journalism initially. And I grew up in Tabor, Alberta, so small southern Alberta town. And the year I graduated high school, my parents retired and they moved to Kelowna. And so during the summers in Calgary, I'd come back to Kelowna and I was like, oh, wow, it's a lot nicer here than it was in Vancouver, in my opinion. Beautiful place to be. And so after graduating journalism school, I moved to Kelowna and I had the opportunity to work at a newspaper here, like a local newspaper. So I was a reporter for 3 years, very exciting job, something new every day, writing multiple stories, and it really tapped into that creativity that I love. That's one of the reasons I went into journalism. But the newspaper industry isn't necessarily the most thriving industry, and we were seeing shrinking constantly. We were seeing staff being let go, the paper size was shrinking, and so I had to think a little bit about my future as a young guy in Kelowna as well. And so I started looking for opportunities, and I guess the real estate industry found me because Remax of Western Canada was looking for someone to head up social media and communications. And it blew my mind that a Western Canada headquarters would be in Kelowna. And so it was just kind of perfect timing, a great opportunity. And over the last 10 years, while my background isn't real estate, I've learned to really love and appreciate this industry and build great relationships and grow an appreciation for what agents do on a day-to-day basis. It's incredible.
This, oh my God, there's so much to unpack with that. I would say, funny you say about the newspaper and the shrinking. I went in to get an oil change at Mr. Lube the other day, and as you pull up, and like what's typical for Mr. Lube, traditional, they're like, "Would you like a coffee? Would you like a newspaper?" And as he went to offer me the newspaper, I thought in my head, I'm like, "Are we still doing that?"
Yeah.
So I just thought it was interesting. I also would say, when I say a lot to unpack there with Kelowna, for me personally, I had the chance to ride. So what did we do? We went out to Tofino, I think in like July of 2020 or 2021, like the thick of COVID. We went on this like epic motorcycle trip. And I had no idea. I'd never been to Kelowna before. Sounds beautiful. I know it's in the mountains. Finally got out there and went, wow, this is gorgeous. And then learned, which was interesting, that there's an international airport in Kelowna.
There
And
is. Yeah.
that blew me away because I thought it was a lot smaller than that. Sort of the thing of this massive company having headquarters there, being there and understanding it now I get it, right? But at first I had no idea. And then the last part to all of that is when you say about not having been in the real estate industry but coming out of journalism. I was just sharing this with somebody earlier, I think on a coaching call today, or maybe the past few days I've been talking to that, but it's we get so deeply entrenched in our own businesses that it's usually hard once you're so deep to step out and see what you need to see, right? Like if I sit here as a business owner now and go, yeah, I know everything. That's a very naive way of thinking, right? There's a lot that I don't know. There's a lot that I don't see. There's like, a whole grapevine happening about whatever we do. And I mean, that's for any business that's out there. But when you're so deeply entrenched in wearing those shoes, you don't actually see it. And this would be something that, again, to everybody listening right now, think about that. You think you know, but you may not know. And so for you coming in from an outside perspective, it's actually very unique to come from communication because now you can look and say, well, I can see things that maybe you're not seeing right now. So I see a huge advantage to that. But anyhow.
Well, just to tag on to that, that was one interesting thing, right? Because I had a bit of imposter syndrome when I joined, and especially about
For
5 years
sure.
in,
Yep.
4 or 5 years in, eventually I made the move over to, we called it member services at the time, regional development. But then I was going and working directly with broker owners. And when I got that job, I asked my boss at the time, one of my mentors, Roy Anderson, I asked him, I'm like, Roy, why on earth would a broker want me to be their rep? Like I have a zero real estate experience. They're probably going to be super upset. And Roy helped me shift the perspective. He said, Wade, you think about a potluck, right? It's a terrible potluck if everyone brings the exact same thing. And thankfully, in our office, in our Remax Western Canada head office, we had people like Elton Ash, who was an
Yep.
agent and a manager and an owner, and Derek Thorvaldson, who was a manager, and Roy, who was an agent and an owner. So we had a lot of that real estate experience that I could lean on because invariably I had many questions for them. But then what I was able to bring was a bit of an outside perspective, an understanding of social media, an understanding of the importance of video content. And so it ended up working out, but it took me a little while to gain that confidence.
I love that analogy of the potluck. So simple, but makes so much sense.
Yeah,
So,
100%.
was there like a pivotal moment for you on maybe or like a particular project in the early days that you started working with me because you've been there a bit now,
Mhm.
that really you believe sort of set that path on the current trajectory that you're on there?
I think so. I think one was talking about social media and getting deep on that side of things. And so I would do a presentation. We have something called Kickstart. At the time, it was called Sales Associate Orientation. It was about once a month. And so all new agents to Remax would come to Kelowna. It was a 2-day event. And this was interesting. It kind of ties into the public speaking side as well. But what I was told about a month after joining the company is, oh, wait, by the way, next month, there's going to be about 60 new agents and you're going to give a half-hour presentation on social media. So good luck with that. And I was like, "Oh,
Go.
okay. Well, all right." And then the nerves started to set in and everything like that. But anyways, over time, that repeated opportunity to be presenting in front of agents and then eventually having like being presenting and seeing them nodding their heads and that things were resonating. I think that that started to kick in and gave me confidence to go deeper with that. And then one thing that really transitioned it for me was back in the day I launched the Remax Hustle podcast. So that was before we got into the power move side of things that we do with Remax Canada. But it was one of these where I saw the trends. You and I were talking about this before about Gary
Yep.
Vaynerchuk, and how
Yep.
he's kind of influential in the marketing space. And he was talking about the importance of podcasts and why it's a really untapped opportunity. And so I just kind of went through the process of teaching myself how to edit, how to upload, all of those sorts of things. And it gave me an opportunity to have great conversations with people who were incredibly successful in the business. And then I think that information just through osmosis thought allowed me to think, okay, maybe there's an opportunity for me to grow within the company in kind of a different direction here and then bring that social media comms expertise.
Very cool. Like you talk about imposter syndrome, and then as you sort of like take that full circle with the podcast, I think I remember thinking at first, and I said this to you off air, like, or no, we said it right off the top of the show, but I had no idea where to start with the podcast.
Mhm.
Like 0. The beauty is we do have a lot of access to information. Of course,
Yep.
lean on some colleagues, try to do what you can to learn. And you sit back today and go, could I teach a course on it? Absolutely, I could with my eyes closed. But not only could I teach a course just by learning, I it's through experience. And now if you just go through real life experience, I mean, I know for me, and I don't know how this works for you, but off the top of when we were doing this, I think we calculated this to be, roughly kind of rounding up here, about 15 hours a week of production for one show. And we're now at the point where it's about 5 hours of production. Right? And it's just because you begin to streamline. You get more comfortable, you get more used to what's going on. The team knows exactly what they're doing. You obviously leverage people to help you with things. Whereas at first, you're sort of running and gunning and trying to figure this thing out on your own. And it's fantastic. But again, to imposter syndrome which a lot of people feel. And I had another coaching client who mentioned that to me the other day, saying something like, I sometimes I get to that listing presentation and I think, I'm shocked that I'm having the opportunity to do this. And this comes back to a mindset. What am I doing from a mindset to try to train myself to say, no, 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 you have that opportunity. You are here and you're here for a reason. Believe in that and do the best you possibly can with it. Right. So I wanted to ask you about this because, we're talking today, again, we're talking about how to communicate to dominate. For those that might have just tuned in here, we're talking with Wade Paterson, Remax Canada director, and we're really exploring these strategic branding strategies. And we mentioned off the top in your bio, and I saw that you said this somewhere. I believe it might be on the Instagram account, but impactful communication is my passion. And I thought I'd ask you, just simply put, like, what does that mean to you?
I remember being in 11th grade, and there was a teacher I had, our English teacher, and he had an assignment for the day. And so he passed out just a blank sheet of paper, and each person got it. And he said, okay, your assignment today, due tomorrow, is to write something on that piece of paper. And the students were a little bit confused. They're like, what do you mean something? Like, he's like, anything. Use that paper to do what you want. As long as you write something on it and bring it in tomorrow, you get 100%. And like all the students were just joking and thinking that this was the stupidest thing in the world. And they wrote one word and handed it in, and they all got 100%. But for me, I took that piece of paper home that night and spent more time than I had ever spent on any homework assignment. And I wrote a short story, and it was probably the best thing I had ever produced at that age. And that was my assignment. And what that teacher did is he allowed me to tap into creativity and kind of gave me permission to experiment, to communicate in a way that I wanted to communicate. So that was the initial spark. It was the first time I knew I was passionate about a certain direction for my future. And so I spoke to my career counselor at the time, and he talked about, okay, well, journalism might be a good avenue to go. You write in journalism. And so that was the direction that steered the course of it. So for me, it's taken a few different mediums. It started off with written pieces, journalism, print journalism. And then as I got into Remax, I was excited about the opportunity. It was nice to have a more stable career choice than maybe the newspaper industry.
Yeah, sure, especially in the changing landscape.
Yeah, exactly. But I was itching a little bit to like still have, I didn't want to lose that creativity side, but it just took different forms. So through social media, there was still the ability to communicate. Now it was digitally. Even through what I mentioned before, being nervous about my first opportunity to give a presentation to agents, that was the public speaking. And so it's taken all of these different forms, but no matter what the medium is, I think that there's a real opportunity for agents to, for anyone listening to this, to really have an impact on your audience through these forms of communication. And there's ways to do it, because I think you said at the beginning of the pod, like it's one of the most powerful tools that we have. It's one of the most important things. And so that kind of sums it up. It's just like whatever form, whatever medium it is, I like to communicate or aim to communicate in an impactful way.
It makes total sense, and again, I'm gonna reiterate that and echo what you just said about what I said off the top. But there are so many different arenas that I see that in, where you can look and say, you know, why is something not working? And it really, I mean, as you dive deep into a lot of things, it will seriously come a lot back to that communication or lack thereof. You know, we're speaking with a lot of broker owners these days, and we know the landscape of the office has changed, right? You know, people were out of the office for a little bit of time, and then there was that ability to get back in the office. But we've also learned to leverage this digital way of communication in a much more normal way. And even people that were scared of getting on camera are just kind of like it's normal these days, right? We've gotten past that whole thing. And as we think to, you know, the communication there, let's say from a broker, from a business, from a sports team down to the parents. And I live and die in baseball facilities and diamonds and hockey rinks these days with my son. You know, you see it. And when there's a breakdown of communication, again, you may be thinking one thing, but people may not be aware. You know, you might be thinking, hey, it's great, everybody knows, but they may not know. And I remember a few years back, I even went to one of my assistant coaches on the baseball team. I was head coaching. I said, hey, man, do you know what's going on? He's like, about what? I'm like, just like everything. He goes like, what do you mean? I'm like, about the team. Goes, yeah, totally. I'm like, you feel like you know when practice and games are? Yeah. And times and locations? Yeah. And picture day and uniform colors and home or away jerseys and whatever? Yeah. You're in the know? Yeah. Like anything you don't know? He's like, no, man, I feel good. Okay. And I actually did that with a bunch of parents,
Mm.
just thinking, can you tell me if you know? Because some of them might turn around, and they didn't. And fortunately, they didn't, because we were doing a good job of communication. But the flip side becomes, if you're not doing a good job of communication, people go, oh, I didn't know that. And I will tell you, I ask that question a lot in my business. Because again, as we said before, when you're in your business, there's things you may not see. And I know for me, every once in a while, I want to ask, like, hey, do you know what we do? And some people are like, yeah, obviously. And then to other people, they're like, well, I think you've got a podcast. And you're like, yeah, but do you know what else I do? Or they'll talk about something else, right? And you're always trying to figure out, you know, what does that look like? So I wanted to ask you, like, when we talk to our industry right now with the real estate industry, what would you suggest? How would you define what impactful communication really looks like? And I guess maybe we just talked about why it's so crucial, but yeah, maybe to that first part, like, what does that look like from an agent to their people, maybe to their colleagues? How would you define that for people?
Yeah, and to double down on that, just what you were saying before, I mean, same thing for us, right? With Remax Canada and what we're doing. Like I would say so many times, if there's an issue or something goes wrong, when you really boil it down, it might seem like something different on the surface, but it often is communication, whether that's communication between departments, communication with our agents or our broker owners. And it's such a good point that that's fundamental. I think impactful communication for agents or broker owners who are listening to this has different forms. So if we talk about social media, let's discuss something we've already kind of talked about, which is
Mhm,
the idea of interviewing other people,
mhm.
right? I think that this is such a great strategy. And I've seen a few agents do it, but I really think it's an untapped opportunity that most haven't really stuck with and made it a dedicated thing.
Stuck
Like
with, you bang on. Yeah, 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 sorry.
yeah, yeah, that's it,
Yep,
and 'cause some people
yep.
have done, like, the 15 businesses, 15 days, 30 businesses, 30 days, but to really make a community podcast that is featuring local businesses in your community, there is such an opportunity from so many reasons. I mean, first off, you have the full length interview, so if it's a 30-minute conversation, whether it's in person, ideally in person and have somebody shooting the video, so now that's a piece of content that you can put on YouTube in its full form. And many people who are searching for the community, we know, I mean, Google owns YouTube. It's the number 2 search engine in the world. It's going to pop up on many people's
Mhm.
searches. And people are veering toward like, hey, I'm not going to read this text article. I'm just going to watch the quick video about this local coffee shop to try to figure out if they're new to the community or they're going to be visiting different places. And so that is an opportunity for the agent who is telling the story of the business owner, but automatically kind of making this connection of like, right? If somebody watching it likes the coffee shop, they realize that it's a real estate agent interviewing the coffee shop owner. Instantly, the viewer, without ever meeting that agent, has that little bit of like toward the agent, which is a big opportunity. So that's from like the discoverability. Then you could break down, okay, you have a full interview. I guarantee there's going to be 2 or 3 clips, probably 1 minute or less, that were really interesting from that conversation. So now you can take those in like vertical form and you can share it places like TikTok, Instagram Reels, Instagram Stories, Facebook Stories, YouTube Shorts. So now you're hitting all of these different platforms because I think one problem that many agents have, I like to call it digital tumbleweeds, of they have this one day mentality when it comes to social media. So maybe they go to a conference and they hear somebody talking about how they have to be on Instagram and LinkedIn and TikTok. And so they create an account there and they have this one day mentality. One day I'll figure out LinkedIn. One day I'll figure out TikTok. I'm just going to set up my account for now and kind of leave it there. And the problem with that is if I'm a consumer and I'm looking for an agent to work with and I'm coming across their information online and then I'm seeing some of their social media accounts that have these digital tumbleweeds with no activity, I'm instantly making some assumptions about that agent that maybe they don't understand tech, that they're lazy. If this is how they market themselves as an agent, how are they going to market my property as, one of their
Mhm,
clients?
mhm.
And so these are bad assumptions that they're making. And so, with the interview piece, not only are you creating content that's really discoverable and interesting and great, you're also creating different mediums or clips that you can share on these different platforms to keep yourself relevant across all platforms. And then the final thing I would say to this that's a huge opportunity is the audience hacking mentality, in the sense that if I'm a new agent, maybe I only have 200 people who follow me on social media. But if I'm interviewing the best local coffee shop in my community, and anyone who's listening to this right now, I challenge you, look this up on Instagram. I guarantee you the most popular coffee shop in your community has minimum 2,000 followers on Instagram. Minimum, probably more. Depends where you live and all of those sorts of factors.
Those are all
But if
local
you
people too, for the most part.
Exactly.
Yep,
Local people for the
yep.
most part, or people who like the community, like them enough to follow them. And so now, even if I don't have a big audience myself, if I'm interviewing this business owner and we kind of chat beforehand, hey, do you mind sharing this content out as well? Now that's me and my business and my reputation and my personality in video form getting in front of that massive audience as well. So that's like one example of what I would see as being impactful communication when it comes to the social media side.
I like that. Okay, so let's talk for just a real brief moment on that. Then, when we talk to measuring the impact of, and I'll
Mm,
preface that by saying a lot of times, and again, 324 podcast episodes deep, uh, who knows how many videos have been posted to social media over the past however long we've been doing it. I'd say thousands. Um, I learned pretty quickly that if I'm going to measure myself through likes, views, and downloads, I'm probably going to be pretty disappointed in what I see and maybe feel that things aren't working. However, here we are today, and the first thing you mentioned is about 324 episodes, top, forgive me, whatever you said, 90% or something like that, like, or
90%.
90%
Yeah.
don't survive. Like, I
Pass
remember
through.
being at a trade show, Realtor Quest, a few years back. And the booth next to me, he's a podcast producer. So we start talking, and I mentioned, I've got a show. He goes, great. I can help you. Blah, blah, blah. What's the show called? And I told him what the show was called. And he comes back. He goes, oh man, you're like ranked in the top 2%. I'm like, oh, what category? He's like all categories. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, yeah, like just internationally, you're ranked in the top 2% of all podcasts. I'm like, what? How? What are you talking about? And part of it is you don't recognize sometimes how many people are tuned in. Remember the first time I got interviewed to be on the radio? This guy, the producer of a radio show, messaged me, emails me, and he's like, hi, we've been listening to your show for the past 2 years and blah, 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 blah. And you're like, I've never heard of the guy before, never had an interaction with him before. He's been listening to my show for 2 years. I never even knew about it. You don't know what you don't know. So now back to the question, right? How would you say, people should measure the impact of this communication strategy, and not just podcast, but video, anything?
It's a long-term game, and I remember I think you had an interview with Katie Lance. She was interviewing you, and you were talking about it was a really good point. You were talking about the fact that real estate relationships, like if you're an agent, it's a long-term play. So we shouldn't always expect these short-term results, right? Like
Mhm.
you build these relationships. People don't decide to, buy a house every single day. It's something that like it could be years and years away. And so it's a tough question to answer of how you measure it,
Yeah.
other than the fact of like, Gary Vaynerchuk says this as well, as like, what's the ROI of your mother, right? Like how you like these things of like trying to measure everything with ROI, things clearly do have
I've never
value.
heard him say that, but what a
Oh yeah.
hard-hitting thought, eh?
Seriously, right? Like if you break it down, it's one of those things where, not everything needs to be necessarily measured in those tangible numbers. Now, what I think it's important to know is how you're approaching it, right? Like if you're just like I believe the following two things to be true. I believe social media can be one of the most powerful communication and marketing tools we've ever had access to.
Yep.
And at the exact same time, I think it can be a complete waste of time. Like either of those statements can be true. It's a matter of how you actually choose to use the tool. So if you're just sat on social media and you're scrolling through your news feed and you're
We call it
telling yourself,
stalking people. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
stalking people, whatever, but with no strategy behind it, and it's just, pure kind of brainless entertainment, I don't think you are doing anything to build your business unless
Right.
you're kind of intentionally having strategy behind that. However, if you're time blocking, if you're, approaching this with a purpose, if you're putting out content that goes beyond vanity and actually adds value to people, I think that there's a really high ROI and it might not be recognized right away. And I wouldn't get too caught up on the followers and everything because it's one of these snowball effects as well. Over time, you'll start to notice it. You probably have done this where it's like maybe the first 50 episodes, it's like, dang, I'm getting 5 viewers, I'm getting 10 viewers. This isn't really moving the needle. But over time, like you said, you don't even realize, but you have these loyal listeners, these loyal followers, and that can result in relationships as well. So it's a really tough question to
Yeah.
answer, like what to be fixated on. But I think it's like any business decision. You don't want to be taking too much time out of your schedule. You want to be strategic. However, I do think you need to have some form of presence digitally. There's a quote by Gary Vaynerchuk. I use this in one of my presentations, but he basically says, if you're not good at creative strategy that is contextual to the social media distribution platforms that completely dominate consumer consumption today, you're dead. And I know I've referenced Gary Vaynerchuk like 3 times
I
in this
know for some
interview,
reason
but
it
I
keeps
think
coming up today. No, but I get it. I actually started that off here earlier. I get it, but I'm with you there, and I would
yeah,
say the same is like, and I make the joke about stalking, and those who follow the show, and I thank everybody who's here today listening to the show. As always, I appreciate you guys. Um, I say this all the time though. It's that same thing of, you know, like you can't hire somebody if you hired somebody to do your social media. It's like hiring somebody to go to a party for you. And I will
mhm,
say, I have a team that helps me. Okay.
yeah,
I've got a team that does help me with distribution and content creation. But no matter what, and anybody can attest to this, it's my face, it's my voice, it's my words. I'm the guy. And one thing that's very important though is that we're not just and a mutual colleague of ours who's been on the show before said, you know, and I think he got this from somewhere too, but he said, you know, be interested, not
mm,
just interesting. And it was a great line and it really stuck with me. And I know for myself, I've been very much into that for a number of years. However, what it really defines as is I'm not just in there posting content. There is an actual strategy to communicate. And I've
mm.
always referenced the coffee shop as we come back to a coffee shop and go, you know, you can't just sit down at some random table with some random strangers and start sparking up conversation. I mean, you can, but they might look at you and wonder what you're doing there. Whereas when it comes to social media, you can certainly sit down at that table and speak with those people. And the beauty of the social platform is they will speak with you, right? And now you have the opportunity to communicate. And where's the ROI from that? Well, you just had another conversation. Yeah, but I didn't, you know, return on investment, money. Whoa, we already said it. Long game, right? Think long game. So I mean, again, I love your answer there because there's nothing actually definitive to be able to measure it.
Mhm.
And I would suggest to everybody that, you know, don't measure the success based on likes and views and downloads. Instead, measure it based on your consistency, measure it based on your engagement. If you can connect with, you know, 5 to 10 people across your social medias in a day, or go 5 to 10 on your feed, 5 to 10 in your stories, go to the next platform, do the same, be interested in their posts and their life. There's your win. All of that
Yeah,
will
and
circle back.
if I could jump into there's a
Yeah.
couple thoughts I have there, and that's the thing is you can't always control the metrics, right? And these algorithms are always changing and all sorts of things. And if you get too caught up with that,
Yep.
it's going to give you a lot of excuses of
Great
just not
ad.
to proceed. But what you can control, what you just said, is your actions, right? So maybe it's 5 people you're connecting with directly. And there's a lot of power in connecting through the DMs as well. You know, if I send somebody an Instagram DM, it kind of almost tells the Instagram algorithm that, okay, these 2 people, they have some form of relationship. Now I'm more likely to come up in their newsfeed. They're more likely to come up in mine. And so these actions actually do have algorithmic benefit as well. And then what I love so much about that concept, be interested rather than interesting. I'm wondering if that was Simon who maybe mentioned that on an episode. I've heard
It
him
was
say
actually
that.
Tim Sirianos, you know,
Okay,
Tim,
Tim
that
Sirianos.
brought it
Yeah.
up, but again, I
Yeah.
don't know. I think he quoted it from somewhere, but again, he's always got a back pocket full of those things. He's great.
Totally, but there's research to back this as well, and I remember so there was a Harvard study that was done, I think it was 2017, and they actually broke groups. So this is with in-person conversation, and it ties into the impactful communication as
Mhm.
well. But the idea, they had 3 different test groups, and one test group was asked to ask more questions in the conversation, like ask more questions to their conversation partner. The second group just have like a normal cadence. The third group, don't ask questions, make it more about yourself, kind of like talking, dominate the conversation that way. And what they found in all of these tests is that the group that would ask more questions was consistently way more liked in every conversation rating. And that goes with conventional wisdom as well. You think about books like Win Friends and Influence People, like they talk about
Mhm.
asking questions and that important. So I think that whatever form that is, if that's social media, if that's in person one to one, even if you're giving a presentation from the stage, like interacting, getting the other person's feedback, asking them questions, showing a genuine interest is just such a powerful form of communication as well.
Again, real important you brought that up. We are talking today, and for those that might have just joined us, with Wade Paterson, director at Remax Canada, and the topic is exactly that: how to communicate to dominate. And you just nailed it. I mean, very well said. And I love the add-on there. So crucial because it is such a strategic play to ask questions. And I'll come right to, that conversation with that person who comes up to you to be like, "Oh, Wade, how are you, man? It's been a while." You're like, "Oh my God, good to see you." And then you stand there looking at each other and you're waiting for the person who came up to you to continue the conversation. You're thinking, "Do I have to do this now?" But the quickest way to deal with that, or the quickest way to make the phone call and have the conversation, ask a question, then
Mhm.
ask another question, and just keep asking those questions, have some active listening happening. And the more open-ended questions you ask, the more they will speak. The more you listen, the more you will have to ask more. You'll learn a lot more. And again, people feel very good about that. Right. So I love the add-on. Now, as we talk about domination, I, I can't go without bringing this one up. Um, Team Canada, Four Nations Cup champions. You're a hockey fan, right?
Yes,
You're a hockey fan,
of
right?
course.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Good Canadian guy. Got to be a hockey fan.
of
But
course.
Mr. McDavid scoring the winning goal, and the man to put the final sort of nail in the coffin there for the U.S. team, who was a great hockey team for sure, just not as good as the Canadians. But it is what it is. But I know that he's also the face of some of the upcoming communications coming down the pipe from Remax, from what I've heard.
Totally. Yes.
Um, is there an example or something you could share particularly, that either from that particular campaign that might be launching or anything, something there that just again from a very strong brand initiative as to why do we leverage faces like this, or is it to help make a connection point? Is it the connection between two brands? Is it, oh, hey, well, if he likes them, I'll like them too? Thoughts,
Yeah.
2 cents to share in any regard to that? I don't know exactly where the question was on that, Wade, but I
No,
thought,
I know exactly where you're going
McDavid
with it.
domination, had to
Yeah.
bring up Canada for a quick minute, so.
Well, full credit goes to our advertising team on these types of initiatives because they've done an incredible job the last few years. And where it sort of started, this whole campaign, it's get the advice you need, not the advice other people like unsolicitedly give you, kind of thing. Like basically pointing to the real estate agent is the expert who can give you this information. And so we kind of had like mom splain and dad splain was like the example. So we had some commercials where like dad's going at the or when they're going to the house to look at it and he brought his own cup and he's listening to the walls and all sorts of things. It was kind of like a cute commercial, but it was basically the premise was that everyone, Bob at the water cooler, your uncle, everyone has an opinion when it comes to real estate, but you want to actually go with those who know, right? Like go with the experts, with the agents. And so this was a campaign. And then what they did a couple years ago now, or a year and a half ago, was they leveraged Kyle Lowry. And that was like the first
Saw that
athlete
one.
venture
Yep.
into it. Yeah, exactly. And so it was kind of like still part of this branch, but hype splain. And so, it's he's yelling, "This is our house," and like
Yeah,
banging
yeah,
the
yeah.
drum and that kind of thing. Yeah.
And
And
she starts
so
yelling it with him.
exactly, exactly. And that was great, right? Like a great commercial, but then we always try to make data-driven decisions. So we look at the metrics and what we saw is that was performing higher than a lot of even the more popular like the Dad Splain commercial, which was really popular amongst our network. Kyle Lowry was still performing beyond that in terms of view duration and all sorts of metrics. And so we wanted to continue going this athlete way, but this year hockey is our sport, like you said. And so the team went, and that was kind of always the number one choice because I'm a Calgary Flames fan. Don't hold it against me, but it's that Southern Alberta upbringing that I've always been a Flames fan.
I like the
But like
Flames. I do like the Flames.
even as a Flames fan, I mean, like our interprovincial rivals are the Oilers. If anyone would be pissed about the sponsorship, it should be like me as a
That's
Calgary
true,
Flames
though. You
fan.
Flames and Oilers fans, it's like us with the Habs or maybe with the Sens. Yeah, I get it. I
Exactly.
get it. Totally.
But objectively, no matter what team you cheer for, McDavid is the best player in the NHL. Like it's just an objective thing. He's got another gear out there.
Yeah.
We saw that with the goal in Montreal, Canada versus USA. It's just incredible to watch him. The fact he ends up getting the game-winning goal in the Four Nations in overtime, so exciting and just kind of solidified why we have this partnership. So, yes, it was something that initially it was data driven to know we want to keep going the athlete direction.
Yeah.
And then it's been a good partnership. I can tell you, I look after part of my territory is the Edmonton brokers. they're happy about this partnership for
Oh, I
sure.
can imagine. Now, do you actually get the opportunity to meet Connor or get to meet like Kevin and like or Kyle, pardon me, and just be able to be there or what?
I didn't know. Our
Okay.
advertising team was, though. There was a few members there and they said he was incredible, did a good
Oh,
job.
cool.
Because that's the other thing, like not to bash Connor, but like he's not known for his like overly charismatic
Yep.
personality. But
Yep.
I think that they did a good job tapping into like the humor there. And then the agent that they casted was great. Like they bounced off each other really well.
That's fantastic. No, it's listen again. It's anytime you make connections on that level, there's a subconscious that triggers for people. So I thought that was interesting. So, going back to this podcast thing for a minute, because I sort of mentioned this off the top in the bio, but you're hosting 3 podcasts, right? Is that current 3 podcasts?
Yeah. One is like really infrequent.
Because there's
So
one I saw there's a one that's Keys from Keynotes,
yeah, yeah, and then
and
the other
then
one, Show Me the Crypto. So how this breaks down is
oh, you're a
yeah, yeah.
crypto
So
guy.
a little bit. I'm
Okay,
interested in the blockchain side of things. So um with Remax, originally it was the Remax Hustle podcast, and then when we became Remax
right. You said
Canada,
off the top, yeah,
we
yeah,
branched out to Power Move. So that's the Remax side. Love doing it. I get to interview young leaders from across the country as the YLN branch on that, and then I'm
yep.
starting to do some broker interviews as well. So love that, super fun, and it kind of continues down that path. I also, speaking on the impactful communication side, I have a YouTube channel that's all about helping people with their public speaking skills, gaining confidence from the stage. And so a podcast I thought would be fun to start on that would be interviewing actual like professional keynote speakers who are really good at their craft and asking them questions like, do you get nervous before you take the stage? What's your preparation like? Because I figured I myself, I'm always striving to be a good communicator from the stage, but that I could learn a lot from these individuals. So I don't know about you, David. For me, sometimes podcasting is this selfish way of just wanting to get one-on-one time with people to learn from them directly.
Oh my God, I'll tell you right off the hop. And that's here. Go right back to like day one.
yeah,
There's something I would have never thought about.
yeah,
How much I have been able to learn from including yourself, how many guests we've had on the show and asking different questions along the way, sometimes some similar questions, and just sometimes you repeat a question because you're like, I want to know more about that. Like let me just keep getting insights. It's like reading a book. You're going to hear a similar story oftentimes, but it's maybe or a similar journey with different story or similar story with a different journey, whatever. You get my point. The point it's like you're going to be able to take something from that, right? So I'm so with you on that, man. You learn so much.
David. Okay. So to get Chris Voss at a speaking event, it's tens of thousands of dollars, probably more, maybe close to $100,000 to get him for a speaking event to talk to a room full of people. You had a one-on-one conversation with him.
Yeah, man.
Sort of like, are you kidding me? Right? Like that's the
Dude, that was
beauty
a
of
cool story
podcasting
too.
as well.
That was a cool story. And you know what? That comes back here. Here, let's leverage that for a second. I love the research you've done here, man. You're good. He and I, and you talk about communication. He and I literally like physically bumped into each other walking. One of us was walking in, one of us was walking out of a restaurant. We're both on the same stage the next day. And it just so happened that like we bumped into each other. I kind of looked up, he looked up, and I went, Chris. And he went, David. And in my head, I went, what the? This guy knows who I am. Talk imposter syndrome. Here we go. Right. And anyways, one thing led to another. And I literally went for it. And he obliged, and it was a very, very cool thing, and of course the conversation was awesome. And anybody who hasn't tuned into that episode, I don't know what number episode it was, but go back through the history of our podcast, go catch that one because he was absolutely fantastic. But
That's
yeah,
so
nice
cool.
pickup there, man. Nice pickup. So tell me something. I mean, 3 podcasts, this role with Remax, you got all sorts going on. There's obviously a personal life. Are you a scheduled guy? Like, how do you leverage time? Like, how do you really get it all done in a day? What's that motive, what does that look like for you? Daily
Yeah,
method of operation, let's call it.
time blocking's huge, right? Like I'm a big believer in the time blocking, and it's challenging sometimes because like the part of my role is being that conduit for brokers where if
Yep.
they're having any sort of challenges with anything, they can come to me, and then whether I'm able to answer that directly or I need to loop in a team member to help them out, but I've got to be that person, and it's important to be available. However, and each of my colleagues is a little bit different in how they approach that, but I like to kind of still time block. So there's times where I will just not be checking my phone for an hour because I know if I have it there, I just won't get anything done. Every time I'm distracted, that pulls me away and doesn't allow me to do that opportunity. So I think that when it comes to like the typical work day, I like to set aside my mornings. I know you've had many guests talk about the importance of a morning routine.
Yep.
I'm a big believer in that as well, of just kind of setting the tone, getting the workout out of the way, getting everything done. So it's like, okay, I've already got a win going into today. And then just being really diligent with that time blocking. Things happen from time to time that are fires that you have to put out. But then I always try to just make up for that potentially later on and readjust, reallocate some time. And then when it comes to all the other stuff that I'm doing, so whether it's the YouTube channel or the other podcast I do that's called Show Me the Crypto, we I've just been one of those guys who like, I'll be watching Netflix and I'm just feeling antsy. Like I need to be more productive. I need to be doing things. And so when I have opportunities, rather than I guess just kind of like going and binging a show, I just would rather reallocate that time and shoot a couple of YouTube videos or do some editing or something like that. So I think I've just got strategic with utilizing that free time. And up until now, haven't had kids. My wife and I are expecting our first in about a month. So I'm sure
Oh,
all
wow.
this will be completely different
Yeah,
for all
you
those
think you're going to be recording as
adjustments.
many podcasts in the nice quiet spaces, eh?
Exactly, exactly. It'll all get thrown on its head, and that's okay. I'm up for it. But up until now, I've been able to kind of manage those things, but it's been a lot of fun. And then I will say what's been beneficial, and I appreciate this about Remax as well, because there's always that fear, that perception of like, well, what if a broker sees that I have a YouTube channel that's about something different, right? Like, is that a bad thing? Are they frustrated that I'm not putting that much energy into Remax? But the
Right.
reality is everything that I've done on the side has almost been a testing ground for what I can be able to bring back to the agents when I'm meeting with them or presenting with them. Because, as I went down the YouTube journey, I was learning a lot of things. I at one point was running some ads. These are things that I could then have the experience myself that I could share with the agents and kind of enhance the training from that point of view. And so I think it's been a positive, but at times it's challenging and it will get more challenging to
Oh,
answer your
listen,
question.
with look, I think there's two sides to that. One is the more you do anything, the better you get at it, the more you learn. And this whole thing of chasing perfection, there's really no real definition to the word perfection. So it's truly
Mhm.
understanding as well that as you're doing, you're going to make mistakes, accept it, embrace it, learn from it. I mean, is that not the path towards success? Is loaded with failure, loaded, and you have to look at it as a stepping stone. We get so caught up in looking ahead to what we don't have. We rarely take stock of how much we've accomplished. And when you realize that and you go, wow, look how far we've come. I may not be where I'm going, but I'm certainly very pleased with where I am. And that's again, if you can take a moment to actually, compartmentalize what you've done, you know. Speaking of, I guess, failure, are there any common challenges that you see specific to the real estate industry, that agents, maybe brokers are making? And do you have any specific suggestions maybe that come to mind? I know, again, you're very much on the spot on something like this, but that we might be able to help them, just to kind of work through that stuff.
Well, go back to social media. That's the first one that
Yeah,
comes to mind.
for sure.
So, especially with Instagram, I noticed this a lot, that a lot of agents and offices are guilty for this as well, but it's in a bit of a different form. So for agents, they will have maybe 5 or 6 templated versions of photos that you could scroll down their Instagram profile and you'll never come across a different piece of content. So it might be
Right.
just listed,
Yeah,
just sold,
yeah.
market update, just listed, all of those things, right? And you could scroll and scroll and scroll, and nothing's different. I think what's important to remember is what the average consumer life cycle is like of a client. Because if a client is following you on Instagram, in that moment in time, if they're looking for their new house, real estate is probably dominating their world, right? Like they're so interested in what's happening. And so if they're scrolling through and they see one of these templated pieces just listed, just sold, market update with a few icons and numbers, that might actually be adding a little bit of value to them at that moment in time. But as soon as they move into that house and they're happy, it might be 5, 10, 15 years until they're ever back in that same sort of mindset. But then they go back to Instagram the next day and they still see these templated pieces of content with nothing else. You're no longer adding value to that person. You're actually just kind of cluttering up their news feed. And so I think that
That's
the
a great
important
point.
piece for agents is to think about, like, how can I add value no matter where they are in that life cycle? And I think that there's two main ways. The first is educational content, which is probably the majority of listeners would fall into that bucket. And
Hmm.
then the second is entertaining. And I think you have to have the right personality to be able to do this, because it's really cringy if it's somebody with an inauthentic trying to do something that's funny and that's not their
You can
personality. Like,
just tell.
you can just tell. So you have to be authentic there. But the educational piece, great example. I use this a number of times as well, but so the Stone Sisters group in Kelowna here, I remember Tamara and Shannon, they did a video a couple of years ago where they were just outside of City Hall, and it was like a quick Facebook Live. And they were like, hey, everyone, we just attended the city council meeting. There's some changes happening to RU7 zoning bylaw. Here's what was discussed. Here's what was decided. Here's what it means for you. And they made it really easy to understand. And I was thinking, damn, like no matter where I am on that timeline, they're adding value to me. They're
Yeah.
teaching me about what is happening in my community, something that could impact me. It might be something as simple as you're at a house and you come across a furnace filter that hasn't been changed in far too long. Great chance to shoot a quick video reminding homeowners, every 3-4 months, whatever the timeline is, be sure you're changing that. And it's like these little sprinkling pieces of value, no matter when it is that the client is seeing it, I think is a really important piece. And then again, going back to like even the icons with like market update, because I see these a lot, right? The little icons and like up percentages. What do those numbers mean?
Hmm.
Because for the average agent, it's probably really obvious. But for the average consumer who's not an expert in real estate, those might mean nothing. So instead of just showing a template with icons and numbers, shoot a quick video,
Talk about
put
it.
this into perspective, explain it, break it down for anyone so they can understand it. So these are some of the ways I think people can add value online.
I like that. Great points to that. And it's really bringing the graphics, the words to life.
Mhm.
We say a picture tells 1,000 words. I mean, imagine what a video can do for that. Right. Now, as part of, today's conversation is very much around, the communication. We've also kind of, it's branding, right? It's exploring those branding strategies. And um, I guess maybe it's what you just said around defining that strategic balance between building up your brand with strong communication really comes back to maybe even the example you just shared about the Stone Sisters there,
Mhm.
right? Like I think that there's a really good point there, and this comes back again to anybody. You're not looking for perfection. We are not looking for the brightest, shiniest object, but what we're looking for is something clear and concise that people could pick up on. And I think it's a great point you hit home on, because I know for me, and I'm sure for you, our social media feeds are flooded with realtors. And this is my sandbox. I'm totally happy about it. I will say though, when I do tap into a realtor's feed, specifically their feed, and I'm just seeing a lot of the templated stuff, it's business boring, right? There is no reason. And where you nailed that point there is because we see it from a lot of people, but where you nailed that point is, yeah, maybe in the home buying process, selling process, I might be going, okay, great, this is interesting. After that, it's no longer interesting, and there's no reason to bring me back. I think that was a very strong point. Um, Now this is a lot of learning for people. And I also know, being in the education space here in the industry, that there are a lot of people that don't feel that professional development, personal development is as important to the bottom line as it is to just go out there and work in a day. They don't necessarily see a ton of value potentially in investing in themselves. Maybe they don't have the money to do so. What would you say to anybody in that regard across? And this could be the social landscape, the communication landscape, speaking in front of people landscape. I mean, what would you say to anybody who it's, when we talk to that idea of development, self-development, again, personally, professionally, but they're like, I don't think I need to, or I'm not ready for it. What do you tell people?
Yeah, like there's statistic answers and then there's kind of like anecdotal, which I'll get to in a second. But from a statistical, using again Remax, because that's where I work as an example, we have this Kickstart session that I mentioned before, which is for new agents. And at one point we ran the stats and it was something along the lines of 80% of those who attended this 2-day training seminar in Kelowna were far, far more likely, or we're still in the industry 5 years later, versus those who joined Remax, didn't attend the seminar, and then 5 years later,
right?
Like it was the total inverse, which was really crazy. And I know for as well, Remax University, again, using that as an example, the statistics on people who have taken several courses and then their average GCI is higher than those who haven't. And so, that's from the brand perspective, what we see. But for myself, I mean, I just think about like, darn, like if you can throw in some audiobooks in habits you're already doing, rather than maybe just listening to music all of the time. Like for me, that's been a huge hack of just like, it doesn't even feel like I'm sitting there, because I'm bad with just sitting and reading a book kind of thing. It takes me a
Me
long
too.
time.
Can't
But
do
like,
it. I know.
if I can throw the audiobook in and be gaining things, it's like, again, there's so many examples of ways you can streamline, you can become more effective. If you take the time to learn some of these AI tools right now, you're getting yourself back time. So for somebody who's like, oh, I don't see the value of it, it's like it's not about just adding a bunch of stuff to your plate. It's actually about you learning some skills, learning some strategies that are going to help you be more effective and gain time back. Like that's the ultimate goal, I think.
Ultimate,
Yeah.
man. So speaking of books, podcasts, anything you recommend that anybody tap into, something maybe good that you're reading / listening to right now? I know it's a loaded question for me because I'm like 2 books a
No.
month,
I'm
and I'm like,
laughing,
whoa,
David, because
what are you looking for?
right now, if you looked at my Audible, it's all like how to be a dad books. It's a kind of
Oh, I thought you were
filling
going to say it's
these.
total MindShare podcast. I was like, yeah, I get it. I get it,
Well,
man.
that of course as well. I think so. One that sticks with me, if you haven't read Win Friends and Influence People, I mean, that's just such a good fundamental book
For sure.
of just, talking about communication, relationships, just such important things for everyday tangible stuff. Throw a smile on your face when you're out there, right? Like it's things that until you start breaking down these simple concepts, like I remember when I was reading that and then I went and I was in the mall and I'm smiling, I felt like I was the only one. Everyone just had a frown on their face. And it's like these little tweaks that we know are the right things to do. We just have to be reminding ourselves of them from time to time. And then the other one, I'm a big fan of Hal Elrod. He wrote The Miracle Morning, really breaking down that morning routine, basically saying there's, 6 activities you can do every morning that in his research was the difference between people who were successful and not. It was the people who were really managing their mornings well, getting, exercise, reading, writing, affirmations, all of those sorts of things. So those are 2 that come to mind, but there's so many good books out there, and, just take on one at a time, throw it in your ears as you're doing a workout and gain some knowledge. It's worth it.
It's the best way, man. I say to anybody, if you haven't, if you've done your phone calls for the day, and now you're in the car driving, turn on a book, forget the music. If you're
Yes.
at the gym, I know it's fun to listen to tunes while you're pumping weights, but like throw on the book. You're going to
Yeah.
learn so much. We feed our bellies, 3 times a day, some people 5 times a day. How often are you feeding your brain? And again, I would say to everybody tuning in the podcast right now, congrats, you are doing that right now.
100%.
What would you say to anybody who says, I can't?
That's a tough one. I mean, it's not true, right? It's, the quote of whether you think you can or you can't, you're probably right. Like it's all about shifting the mindset on that particular thing. I'll compare this to a specific example, because I think one of the most common is video, right? When people think
Yeah.
about video, they're like, wait, I can't. Like, I hate how I look on video. I hate how I sound on video. It's such a stumbling block. And I saw a question come in as we're doing this as well about talking about authenticity. And so that's the thing too, is that for some people, they might not feel authentic being on video initially, but that doesn't mean that you should never do video. It's something that you work at, right? Like, there's my first early videos were super, like, I can't watch them. Like, it's painful to watch those pieces of content, but that was my chapter one. That was my very beginning at it. And anything in life, you have to work at it. You go over time. So if somebody said, I can't, I would ask, well, how much time have you actually put toward doing this? Like, have you given it a real effort? And if they've spent years and like it just hasn't worked out on whatever they're trying to do, it's like, okay, fair enough. You've got like the backup. But if you've tried it once or twice or 20 times and you're like, I can't do this, it's like, go try it 200 times and then tell me that you can. Like, you've got to put in the reps. This is anything, we're talking about communication, that's video content, that's social media, that's public speaking. I still get nervous every time I give a presentation. I'm curious, David, for you, you do a lot of presenting as well. Do you still get the nerves at all, or is that not such a factor?
It's an interesting timing of that question. First, trying to think of which way to answer this for you. I would say on one hand, yesterday happened to be maybe one of the more nervous times I've had speaking. And go figure this. It was for an audience of a whole 25 people. And the question is, well, what made you nervous? And I know oftentimes when I get into an audience, I happen to know a lot of folks in the audience, certainly not everybody. There are a lot of people that will know me, and certainly not everybody. And you kind of do your thing and you just go. This one particularly happened to have a few of my coaching clients in it, an old client in it, as well as a cousin of mine in it. And it was one of those where my cousin never really seen me speak or she's never been in the room when I've spoken. She's probably seen me online and social. And it was just different. And I thought, wow, I can't believe I've got these nerves going into this. And of course, the minute you take the stage, you're like, I'm not nervous. Like, we're good. I know what I'm doing. But I will say, I was in New York a number of years ago in the green room at Inman Connect. And I was about to go keynote the marketing track. And I happened to bump into Simon Sinek. And Simon and I are talking and we're there. And again, when you're in that green room, it's kind of like you're good. You're sort of, we'll talk to each other. Never spoken to him before. Didn't know him from a hole in the wall. He didn't know me. But, we just got to kind of like shoot in the breeze a little bit. And I said to him, I got to ask you something. He says, yeah. I said, do you still get nervous when you go up there? And he looks at me and he says, he puts his hand on my shoulder and he's like, David, if you don't get nervous, it means you don't care. And my shoulders dropped and I was like, I took this sigh of like air and I was just, wow, thank you. And it made me realize that it's okay. Then though, what I did, and this has taken time. Okay. This has taken a lot of time for me to do. And it's come with a lot of practice. Talk about what you just mentioned of, try it 200 times and see where you go. I've had the opportunity to speak a lot more times than that at this point, and there's still the butterflies that happen. But there was a point in me a number of years ago from all the practice that I've done and the courses I've taken and the learning about keynote speaking and everything else that I've done to continue to hone my craft. And I'll dare I use the word perfect. There's no such thing. And I know I can continue to get better. I started to channel what felt like nerves. I channeled that through my mind and said, no, it's not nerves. It's complete adrenaline. And it's now the self-talk of you are about to go crush it. You're going to do a fantastic job. You know your content. You know your audience. You're comfortable up there. This is not nerves. You're just excited to be there. And through the simple paradigm shift in my own mind of self-talk, literally self-talk. And of course, there's other little practices I take. Like if you ever see me with earbuds in my ear before I'm about to take the stage and I'm like bopping my head, I'm probably listening to Ramble On by Led Zeppelin. Because I'm literally about to go ramble on, like whatever it is, it just gets me hyped up. And then you take that stage and you're ready to rock. And seriously, the nerves just kind of fall away. So I know a long-winded answer to a shorter question, but it truly was about self-talk and channeling what that feeling really is, because our minds will tell us it's one thing. But hey, if my mind can tell me it's one thing, why don't I tell my mind what it really is? Make my mind think it's something else and then channel that.
I love that. And for me, in my experience, like the times I haven't been nervous where I've just been like, oh, this will be a breeze, those usually don't go the best. Like those are the times where like I'm like, damn, like I should have been a little more prepared for this or that type of thing. Whereas I love your reframing of it, of like the nerves are actually a good thing. This is part of it. And just to circle back to the point about the small room, it's such a good point. And this is something that like people assume like talking in front of 600 people, sure, that's daunting, that's scary, but in some ways that's easier than talking to 6, because depending on the room layout, who those people are, all sorts of things, like there's different factors there. But I guess to anyone listening to this, I did a quick poll with our brokers and then also with we call it the Young Leaders Network within
Yeah, the
Remax.
while in there, yeah.
Yeah. And I asked them 2 questions. I asked them, number one, how important do you think public speaking is to your skills as a leader? Both, Young Leaders Network leaders, brokers, obviously leaders of their offices.
Yep.
The
Yep.
average rating was about 9.4, 9.5 out of 10 as an importance skill, like the most important skills that you could have. And then I said, okay, how do you rate yourself as a public speaker? And the average rating was around 6.3. So there's
Okay.
clearly
Higher than I
room.
thought you were going to say, actually.
Yeah, yeah, and
Yeah.
there's some ones, some twos, but for the most part, but these are people who probably every week, especially with the brokers, are giving presentations to groups. They know what they're talking about, but still. And so I think, if you're listening to this or watching this and, you get quite nervous with public speaking, just know that that's okay. And it's an important skill to work on, because I think it is one of the most important things that a leader can have. And not just me saying that, clearly the membership as well.
Oh, I love that you brought that up. And I mean, we could go on about that topic for a whole long time, because I do believe that again, and as we've taught, hey, full circle, right? We've talked about communication a whole bunch today, and that's really what the premise of today's conversation was about, the importance thereof. And it could be a one-on-one, it could be a one-to-many, and that one-to-many could be online or it could be offline. You know, they do say, and this is where I do, often question if something is seriously wrong with me, because they say, one of the biggest fears most people have in life is speaking in front of a crowd. And I'm like, put me in, coach. So I'm not really sure where the whole thing's gone backwards, but yeah, it doesn't go without the nerves. It doesn't go without the practice. I mean, she doesn't do this anymore, but Jennifer, my wife, would ask me at times, she's like, what are you rehearsing? I'm like, oh, my presentation. She's like, but you've given that one, and your content. And I'm like, yeah. She's like, so why are you rehearsing it? I'm about to go give it again. And I want to make sure I'm good. I want to make sure I'm amazing. I want to make sure that I can deliver for the people in front of me. And if I can do that and I can help them in some way, shape, or form move the needle for themselves, even one little bit or a whole bunch, we're winning. We're winning. And that's a special thing.
That's an important thing. And I just want to jump in. One last thought on this is that what you just said there, because this is a mistake I made for years. It was more of a selfish piece of like, yeah, public speaking was scary, but I loved it. Why did I love it? Because people would high five me after and they'd say, Wade, you crushed it, and all those sorts of things. And I started to realize there needs to be a deeper reason for why you're going up there. And it needs
Oh
to be
man.
about the audience. It
Oh
needs to
man.
be about the audience of like, what are they getting from it? What's the purpose? And so for me, when the nerves are happening and I'm about to present to brokers, rather than make it about myself, I have to think, why is it important that I do well? Because this is good information that will help them in their businesses. And so if I'm able to communicate in an effective way that they learn from, it will help them. And so like by reframing it that way as well, not just with the nerves, like you pointed out that great idea, but also what your audience can get from it and why that's important. I think those are two really key points.
Look, I will tell you too, and I love the fact that you brought that up, because that's for me that was a big learning as well, right? Like,
Mm.
if I take you way, way back when it came to the speaking idea, this was sales presentation, and I mean, it has evolved, but I mean the evolution of it over the number of years plus, decade and a half, probably more, I learned. and I evolved and I realized this is not, I'm no longer, it's not a sales presentation anymore. And quite frankly, when I deliver and I help people that are there, hey, you want to go figure out what else we can help you with? Please, we've got a lot of resources you can tap into. My goal today is to do something for you in this moment that you're going to be able to take away and put into action. And when you do that, and it works, you will thank yourself. And at that point there, I won. I won. Like it's somebody's helping themselves with something. It's because of something that was said on that stage in that room that day. It is truly the most amazing thing in the world. And people come right back to ROI. Put the ROI on that. Okay.
That's right.
I don't
That's
know,
right.
man. A big smile, a big thank you. And I will tell you, and I've had a lot of cool high fives on stages after speaking. A really, really cool one, though, was when I went up, did my thing. Magic Johnson went up and did his thing. And then I went back up once he was done his thing. And we were like, we high-fived each other as we were walking by. And I was like, that's Magic Johnson, man. I feel like I just hit a three-pointer, bro. That's crazy.
That's
It was a very cool feeling, man.
That's cool.
So as we talk about this, I would ask you then, as we're closing out here, it's the end of the day. You've gone through your day. You've done all sorts of amazing things. You've really been in control no matter what's happened, but you're going to lay your head down. How do you know it's been a successful day for you?
I like to ask myself, how much money did I make? I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
I'm like, this guy's a regular listener. There's no way he's about to say that.
I know. Had to throw it back to the fact that that's never been given. No. So for me, it's a balance. It's two things. And it's kind of how I start my morning. And I think this ties into the conclusion. So I like to do every morning 7 things I'm grateful for. The first 2 are always the same. The number 1's my wife. Number 2 is our healthy baby girl that's coming, and hopefully all of that works out well, goes smoothly. So those are the first 2 things, and then I always find five other things to be grateful for, and there's always 5. Like, it's, if you think like, oh, I don't know what, like everything's crummy, blah blah blah, it's like, are you sick? No. Okay, great. Like, is your family members alive? There's some, like, you can really get basic on
true,
it.
Man.
There's so much there that we can be grateful for. So that's a key part. And then the other side of that is what I'm striving towards. So a few just key goals, things that, whether that's annual goals or different things, it's just kind of like a 20-second thing that I have in my head, hitting those different parts of things that I hope to achieve in the future. And so that's kind of the balance. And so I would say, how do I analyze whether the day's been successful? Number 1 would be, did I move the needle of growth on some of those things that I'm striving toward? And even if it was a day that maybe that didn't happen for one reason or another, it's kind of like not worrying so much about that, but then just going back to the gratitude of like, okay, well, do I still have, is my wife still here? Is there, our house isn't on fire, like things like that. And so I think no matter what, you can still end the day with a win that way. But having that balance of what you're striving toward to move forward, but also be appreciative for what you have.
Great answer. Absolutely love it. And obviously, you obviously listen to the show because you knew exactly where I was going with that when you brought the money. I was like, yeah, right. Here we go. Right. But seriously though, it is so crucial, and we take so much of life for granted. So I love that answer. Wade, any if you had to summarize today's conversation, or any final words of wisdom, just to kind of sail everybody off this week into the sunset from this show, how should we close out today? What have you got?
I'd say just start small, right? Like, all of these things are daunting, whatever we're talking about. If we're talking about social media and leveling up, if we're talking about the idea of starting to do more video content, if we're talking about the idea of utilizing AI, everything is overwhelming at the beginning. Just pick one thing and then time block, set aside half hour in a week as a starter, right? That non-negotiable, you will work on that particular skill over and over and over, and just make progress. Social media, if you're brand new to it, start with one platform. If you're wondering, well, what platform? What do you like using? Or what platform do you think you'll like using? And then question number 2, what platform do you think your clients are using? Go there, start to experiment. Don't take yourself too seriously, because social media is also a place people go to escape some of the seriousness of life. So if you can meet them on their level while still being contextual to your business, you're winning. Those are my thoughts.
Absolutely amazing. Once again, today we were joined by Mr. Wade Paterson, Remax Canada Director, talking about how to communicate to dominate, exploring strategic branding strategies. Wade, absolutely phenomenal conversation today. Thank you very, very much for all the insights and all of the time. This was awesome.
Thanks, David. This was a lot of fun.
Absolutely, buddy. You've either been listening to this, you've been listening to the MindShare podcast, whether it's been on my website, maybe it's been on one of your favorite podcast platforms. I want to say thank you. And of course, if you visit the website, when you visit the website, of course, you're going to go to the website. Check out our full range of services, from one-to-one coaching, the MindShare Collective group coaching, momentum training, keynote speaking. All of it is there to take your business to the next level. We truly, truly take a lot of pride in helping everybody do that. Don't forget to download your copy or your free copy of the Ultimate Marketing Bundle while you were on the website. It's all in place to help you build more mindshare, to get more market share, and of course, learn more about joining the revolution. For all inquiries, just get in touch with us today. If you haven't yet, we ask you please go on over to ratethispodcast.com/mindshare101. You can do that on your Android and or your Apple smartphone, and give us a quick little rating. Tell us how much you love the show. If we haven't connected on Facebook and or TikTok yet, it's MindShare101. And of course, please follow, if we're not on Instagram, at David Greenspan 101. Want to take a quick moment to say a big thank you to Kits Keep in Touch Systems, REM Magazine, and REVEL Realty for their continued support of the show. This has been another episode of the MindShare podcast. Thank you for tuning in.